is 90-degree angle like the optimal position or whatever? Like, well, maybe for strength, it might be the optimal position. But now if we create an imbalance where now we're not stimulating certain parts.
You know, we had Joel Seedman on the podcast. And the cool thing is that when we were talking back and forth, because Joel has said, like, this is the ideal joint angle or the 90 degrees, the ideal joint angle, right? And when we were talking to him, it was cool to understand some of his concepts make a lot of sense. When you work with a lot of professional athletes, right, who need to get in and out, and maybe they need to work with heavy loads, maybe squatting all the way down with 500 pounds wouldn't be ideal, but maybe going to a 90-degree joint angle is. But he did mention something that we talked about. He mentioned how, like, if you go to those deep joint angles too often, it would lead to degradation, right? But that's only within the context of an athlete maybe trying to progress it too quickly. If we look at
too quickly, exactly.
If we look at your progressions, if you progress it with no pain, slowly over time, no athlete's going to get injured with that.
Yeah, and life is supposed to be with challenges. Things can still happen, but we look at certain percentages out there in sports, and the 90-degree angle thing is actually, that's not new. That's actually like how guys have been training in sports for a long time now.
Yeah.
And so, like, is 90-degree angle like the optimal position or whatever? Like, well, maybe for strength, it might be the optimal position to be that our body is like strongest in.
Yeah.
But now if we create an imbalance where now we're not stimulating certain parts. So I think the whole range of motion is important, meaning someone could criticize Joel for, working on the 90-degree angle, but how much stuff did we do today that was less than 90-degree angle?
Yeah.
Someone could laugh at me.
100 reps.
We did 100 reps
at pulses.
15-degree angle.
Yeah.
That's less than 90-degree angle. But we also then did full bend. So, I mean, there's just no advantage to being weak in an area. And the 90-degree angle is probably the most overused section of strength. Think how we line up for a deadlift. Think how we get into a squat. So the 90-degree area is used a lot. And so most people have a lot of potential to really get new stimulation for the tendons and gradually build up stronger ligaments by working sort of the end ranges.
Can you explain that a little bit? Because we've had people where we've mentioned that and we've talked about that, but people don't understand why is it not just working the muscle? Why is it working the tendons and the ligaments and strengthening those over time? Because many people don't think that you can really strengthen those. They think that after they start to degrade, they're just going to get worse as you get older.
Yeah. So if we think about the Achilles is the biggest tendon in our body. And when we get into calf work where the knee is more bent now and the load is now like on the Achilles, well, you now also end up with more load on that soleus muscle, that lower, deeper calf muscle. And I mean, there's a brilliant study from 2019. Well, I don't know if brilliant's the right word, but it makes it really clear that people weaker at extending that foot have more Achilles tendonitis and stuff. So, and not just at extending the foot, but then within weakness extending the foot in like a bent knee rather than a straight-legged position. So like when you now start to load that knee over toe and load the calf, now that weight is like going into the Achilles, meaning there is load on our muscles, tendons, ligaments when we're doing just about anything. And if you now go into like a much deeper position or something like that, you're now going to put, it's like if someone who had like tendonitis, they would feel the pain in those areas. It's like someone with tendonitis, they reach the knee over toe, they're going to feel pain in that area. Now, if they sit back into like a 90-degree position, not letting the knee over toe, they might be able to keep the pressure more on the muscles. So there does simply have to be, like, when you go into these more quote unquote extreme sort of ranges, there's then more, your muscle can only go so far. And so there's more pull on the tendons and the ligaments. So it's just sort of a stimulus thing. You still feel the muscle, but you're now stimulating more into the tendons and the ligaments. But then we need to be strong in those areas to be protected.
Pat Project family, I don't want you guys to continue looking dusty in your old gym clothes. That's why we've partnered with Viora Clothing. You see, I'm guilty of not wanting to wear these gyms to work out because they feel so good. So you guys need to head over there and just go check them out. This is the Stratotech tee. It's so comfortable. Oh, and let me just let you guys out. Andrew, how can people get it?
Yes, guys, you guys got to head over to viori.com/powerproject, VUORI.com/powerproject. Links to them down in the description below. Let's get back to the podcast.
So someone could probably take someone who, has really deeply studied muscles, tendons, ligaments, could probably do some fantastic stuff to see, which exercises work which things. But yeah, if you just sit back, on a squat, you are going to be winding up using more muscle than if you just reach your knees forward and like, oh, my knee hurts there, right? Mm-hmm. So scaling those qualities, because in sport and life, we wind up in those positions. So we can build those up, and then the very tendon can develop and grow. And there's been some stuff, they didn't even have a name for it, but there's even like pictures in the study of people doing reverse step-ups, like exactly like we were coaching today. They didn't even have a name for it. It was just like step down off the box this way, you know what I mean? And now there's been like the Peterson step-up and the Poliquin step-up and now they, yeah. And well, my name happens to be Patrick. It kind of works out. You got three. But the point is that they found that like the patellar tendon would actually regenerate and grow and strengthen. So it's almost like if you said, like, here's probably a simple way to think about like what would put pressure on your tendons or ligaments. Think about your body, like what movements would hurt? You know what I mean? Yeah. Because when someone says, "Oh, my knee hurts," they're not talking about their quad muscles hurting. You know what I mean? They're usually talking about their quad tendon, their patellar tendon, or I had my MCL or my ACL or this or that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's almost like you're thinking, what shit hurts your body? And then how do we scale that back to a level that doesn't hurt your body? And then we get stronger at that. I mean, that's really, if you just scratched everything I rambled about for the last 5 minutes and took that statement, that would almost be a simple way of thinking about it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like what would hurt your joints? Like what would hurt your shoulder, your elbow, your this, your that? And then how do we scale that down to a level that doesn't hurt and then train it? And that's actually, a lot of physical therapists really understand that concept. So actually quite a few of the people here today who were, were so appreciative of this stuff are physical therapists, because they duplicate this data and they're using it. They're using ATG with like amazing results with their patients because they understand how to apply it. So ATG doesn't work or not work. Everything we do out there can work or could not work depending on how it's applied. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the simplest way to explain it. Is like we're taking the things that hurt and then finding the level that doesn't.
I think, there's something very simple that people can think about is there's a risk reward factor, with everything, but there's a reason why it's called risk to reward. In life in general, you don't really get the reward without at least some risk. And so while we want to encourage people to move pain-free, we want to encourage people to get better ranges of motion, you're doing so in a fashion as if you were to be putting your mother or your grandmother through a training session. You're not trying to white knuckle these things. You're not trying to. There's actually a bunch of individuals today that were doing the ass to grass split squat, and I went over to them and I just put my hand on their shoulder and I said, "Relax your neck." And then I said, "Okay, hold on a second. Let's have you start the exercise over. Okay? I want you to breathe. I want you to concentrate on just really relaxing." I said, you were wincing through your face a lot. You had some good movement there. It was a great movement pattern. But when you got to a place of discomfort, you went, and it looked like you were taking a poop. And when you clench up the old butthole like that, that's not a great way to demonstrate how mobile you can be. And so,
smart.
I heard Nsima talk about before, which I have not thought about before, but I know about kind of relaxing the face, but relaxing the eyes. I was like, oh, that's a really awesome cue. And so I told the guy, I said, relax your eyes and he went to get in position again, and he moved quite a bit further, and he was like, wow, that's really making and it's just sometimes that encouragement to people, but just having those tools can allow you to take these little extra risks that will give you that little extra reward. The hard part sometimes is like, how iffy do we want this to get? And I do think that Joel Seedman brings up a lot of really interesting points. It is really important for people to understand if you don't work on mobility that often or that much or at all, and you go to do an Olympic lifting style squat and you're a person who's tight like myself, you are giving up position. But the question now is giving up position for what? You know, are you just on a slant board with no weight? Because my God, if that throws you off and that gets you hurt, then you have a lot of current issues that need to be addressed. You're just not a very healthy person.
Life is going to be pretty risky.
Life is going to be risky. Everything's going to be kind of hurting, right? And it's unfortunate for people that can't move in those positions. But you most likely can do a lot of these things with a 20-pound dumbbell, a 40-pound, a 60-pound kettlebell.
Most of what we were doing was body weight today.
Yeah, and we're all doing body weight.
And the sleds even reduce, it's almost like negative body, like that heavy forward sled drive. You can't move without your knee going over your toe, but you kind of get to lean your weight against it. It's slow. Yeah, it's exactly right. And we complimented Joel Seedman's coaching of how much he gets guys to control the weights. He's getting guys to control heavy weights. I'm not trying to compete against him or compete against anyone. The movements we did today are just trying to fill that gap in the system of how do we improve at those areas we stink at. And there's a risk involved in doing anything. But when we do that, how much does that reduce our risk going forward for the long term? So I always believe there's a solution.
And as I explained, and I saw you explain the same exact thing today, you want your ability, like your current ability to demonstrate strength or mobility, to be able to move upward, but your performance is not ramming and slamming up against that. You are continually elevating yourself. You're continually elevating your capacity. You have a larger capacity, but for the most part, you don't really ever go to full capacity. There's usually not a lot of great reasons. You're not going to get the training stimulus even that you're looking for. When you think about some of the greatest sprinters and some of the greatest explosive athletes that we've ever seen, and even a lot of power lifters, it's really rare for them to go above their capacity. You want to develop an incredible work capacity, work beneath that, occasionally brush up close to it and say, "Ooh, that was maybe a little too much, but luckily I got the rep, or lucky I was able to do that thing." That is how you improve. And I think that it's hard to be composed. It's hard to kind of stay in your lane and relax and just let that happen that way.
That's a great way of putting it with the capacity. And it makes me think of the backward sled, which we've talked to death. But it's like the idea with that is that, sure, people can reduce pain in a session of doing it, but that's not the purpose of it. I've done over 100 miles of it, which now I got to start keeping track again. It's probably getting close to 200 miles.
Hey, little mama, let me whisper in your ear. Like, comment, subscribe to the channel because we continue to bring you peak content on this channel. Obviously, you guys are here. You guys have watched the whole video. So like, comment, subscribe. All right. See you later.